Hi, can everyone hear me?
Absolutely.
Okay, I just did this great introduction and realized I was on mute. So I'm going to start over. That's okay. So let me start over. Just gave us more time for our scholars to join us. It's all right. So welcome to today's Conviron Scholars Workshop, where we will be talking about careers for plant scientists in academia and government. So before we get started, I just wanted to remind all of our students to please self-mute during the workshop, and feel free to unmute if you have a question or comment for our panel, or just go ahead and use the chat box. So we have a great panel with us today. Our panelists all started their careers as plant scientists, and joining us today, I'm going to start in alphabetical order. We have Carl Bernacchi. He's a research plant physiologist at USDA-ARS Photosynthesis Research Unit and associate professor at the Department of Plant Biology at the University of Illinois. And Siobhan Braybrook, assistant professor at the Department of Molecular, Cell, and Developmental Biology at UCLA. And Peggy Lemaux, who's cooperative extension specialist at the University of California, Berkeley, and also the past president of ASPB. And Aaron Wyman, associate professor of biology at Arbor University. So why don't we go ahead and start with Carl for some more detailed introductions?
Sure. Hello. So as mentioned, my name is Carl Bernacchi. I'm a USDA scientist working for the Agricultural Research Service in Champaign, Illinois. I've basically started my PhD at the University of Illinois, where I'm currently housed, and working in plant responses to climate change with a strong emphasis on modeling photosynthesis. Throughout my PhD career, I took advantage of a number of different research opportunities at a number of different locations, including working at a facility in Italy, as well as the soy-based research facility here in Illinois, as well as taking on a very strong, like I said, computer modeling component of my research. From there, I went on to the United States Department of Agriculture, worked as a postdoctoral research associate for about 3 years, after which I worked for about 5 years for a state laboratory at the Illinois State Water Survey, where I focused a lot of my research on looking at plant-atmosphere interactions. I stayed there for about 5 years, after which I found what I consider to be more or less my dream position, which is an ARS funded position, but integrated into the university atmosphere or environment. And so the reason this is a dream position is because it carries with it a very strong research emphasis with very focused research objectives, while still being able to participate and interact in a very large research community that you would typically find at a large research institute like the University of Illinois. A number of different agricultural research service laboratories around the country have a similar type of focus where they're more or less ingrained in the university culture while still carrying through the missions of a government-funded research program. And so what I'm working on right now is still very much a strong component of what I've been developing since I was a graduate student. I still do a lot of modeling, although originally it was at a leaf and chloroplast scale photosynthesis modeling. More recently, I've been working at the leaf scale all the way up to the ecosystem or regional scale. I'm also incorporated a great deal of atmospheric research into my program, basically looking at the Earth's surface and how it interacts with the atmosphere and trying to get at ecosystem scale processes. In addition to that, I'm working a lot on understanding plant physiological responses to the environment through phase free or CO2 enrichment experiments, as well as incorporating a lot of high throughput proximal remote sensing techniques into the work that I do. I was also asked a little bit on how I got here, and so how did I get here? My experiences through my PhD, my postdoc, the first position I had and the position I have right now, basically just culminated in the current position through just taking advantage of opportunities as they're presented to me, and oftentimes taking positions that necessarily weren't my ideal position, but were a great opportunity to take a step in that direction. And so I think that's my introduction, unless the moderator would like me to add anything.
No, that's great. Thank you. And Siobhan, would you like to go next?
Sure. Good morning or good afternoon, wherever you are.
Or whatever.
It's morning for me. So just to recap from what Melanie said, so I'm now an assistant professor at UCLA in Los Angeles. but I actually started in Canada. So I did an undergrad and I got into a lab relatively quickly and was working in seed physiology there. And then I did my PhD at UC Davis. So I came down to California and I worked on embryo development. And that's when I started working in plant development, which is something I still do now. After my PhD, which was 5 years, I went on to do a postdoc in Switzerland. So I've kind of moved all over the place. I did my postdoc on phyllotaxis and starting to combine physics with biology, which was something I'd always really liked. And from that, I got my first position, which was called a Career Development Fellowship, but it was a starting group leader position at the Sainsbury Laboratory in the University of Cambridge. And so that is a research-only department, even though it's within a university. And so I had experience being somewhere where teaching was less of a focus. And I knew that for me, teaching was actually incredibly important. And I think it's a really important part of an academic's job. And so when my position was ending there, I knew that I wanted to move on somewhere where we could combine research and teaching. And so the job came up at UCLA and I applied for it and ended up getting hired. And I've been here for 2 months now. How did I get here? I think being able to recognize possibilities and trying for every single one of them. So I think when you look from the outside, it looks as though people have just achieved success after success, possibly, when you're sort of looking into the future at what you might do. But really, there are so many failures that pepper the trajectory. So lots of fellowships I didn't get, lots of jobs I didn't get, lots of grants that I haven't gotten, all these things. And I think you just have to try your best, do the best you can, apply for everything that looks as though it is something you could be interested in. And you will eventually have something that works out. So that's how I got here, by applying for lots and lots of things. Yeah.
Thanks, Siobhan. And Peggy?
Okay, I mean, I think what Siobhan said is absolutely true. My trajectory was not a straight shot. So I'm going to start a little earlier because it'll help explain where I am now. So I actually grew up on a farm in northwestern Ohio. And when I went away to college, I wanted to get as far away as I could from the farm. So I got training in microbiology, and then I got a master's degree at the University of Michigan Medical School. And at that time, I was like, well, I don't know if I'm really smart enough or want to like do a PhD. So then I worked for a pharmaceutical company in Michigan. And from there, I went back to the University of Michigan, got my PhD, again in microbiology. And that was, well, at that time, the man who was my PhD advisor said, oh, we know everything in microbiology, so you should find something else to do. So that absolutely is not true because I'm working on microbiomes now, so I can tell you that's not true. But I then took a postdoc at Stanford, and that was right at the time when recombinant DNA was being rolled out and used. And from there, I was in a medical school and thought that's what I wanted to do. And then the more I interacted with people in the medical school, the more I decided I didn't want to do that. So I was out walking around on the Stanford campus and happened upon the Carnegie Institution of Washington. So this is like what Siobhan said, you just never know when something's going to happen. Walked in there, they were looking for, they had just hired a new person, they were looking for somebody who could do recombinant DNA as a postdoc, and I was like, oh, how about me? So that's when I made my move into plant biology, and I've never been sad about that at all. And from there, like Siobhan, I had 5 folders filled full of job applications. And I was like, oh, maybe that one. Oh, maybe that one. And none of them came through. I finally applied for 2 positions at DeKalb Plant Genetics, and I got one of those. And there I got to be a part of a group. That's where I really learned my plant biology, was in a company. And we were the first group to genetically engineer corn, and that's really how I got my position here at Berkeley, which is a weird one. It's cooperative extension. A lot of people don't know what that is, and a lot of people said to me, "Why are you taking that job? That's, you know, a dead-end job." It's the greatest job ever, and I will talk about that later. But it's a perfect job for me because it combines sort of outreach to the public and doing research. So my lab does research on genetically engineering cereal crops and doing genome editing. So that's sort of the research side. And then on the outreach side, I work with, well, for 20 years I worked by myself basically, but recently got some money to bring graduate students in. And so we have a pretty, I think, active program here now where I'm helping people, graduate students, learn how to go out and talk to the public, and it's probably one of the best things that's happened in my career. So that's it. Melanie? Maybe she's on mute again.
We could probably just move on to Erin.
Sorry, yeah, let's move on there. You know what? I have a mute button on my headset that keeps getting depressed when I move for some reason. And Peggy, I was going to ask you, with your microphone, I think we were getting some feedback from that. Is it flexible where you can pull it, like bend it a little bit away from your face a little bit? If not, but we'll go ahead and move on to Erin. Okay.
So, hello, good morning, good afternoon. If it's night, congratulations. I'm ready for a nap too. My name is Aaron Wyman. I am an associate faculty member at Spring Arbor University, and to give a little context, that's 45 minutes south of East Lansing, 45 minutes due west of Ann Arbor. So I have the best of both worlds. I'm in neither backyard, but I can get there if I need to. I also grew up like Peggy on a small family farm, 5 generations on both sides. All I knew growing up was farming. And so I loved plants just because I did. It was just what you did. And so I went to college, a small liberal arts college, about 20 minutes from my parents' place. I'm a mama's boy. And I didn't want to be too far from mom, and she didn't want to be too far from her, and it worked out well. Was trained as a biochemist. Ended up going to North Carolina, Chapel Hill, because it was a lot warmer, and I liked that. Joined Ralph Catrano's lab. Was Ralph's last graduate student at Carolina before he headed to WashU. Finished my master's degree there, headed back home to the University of Michigan for 5.5 years. Best part about that is I met this lovely woman named Anne who was willing to marry me, and it's been the best part of my life, hands down, without any question. Anne was younger than I was, so when I finished my PhD, she said, "It's my turn." I said, "Fair enough." So we headed to Purdue, and I did postdocs at Purdue for several years. Awesome experience, great people there. I did a 1-year sabbatical fill-in at a liberal arts college. I was hooked, knew what I wanted. Like everyone else, I applied across the Midwest. I applied to 50 positions. I had a number of phone interviews, had some face-to-face interviews. 2008, middle of March, I got offered a job in Chicagoland area at a school named Aurora University. Jumped at it. A good friend of mine from undergrad was on the faculty in biology. She says, "You're going to love it here." She was right about that part. So we headed over to Illinois. We had Evan a 1.5 years later. And 2 years after that, one of my very best friends in the world, who was in my PhD lab at Michigan in Charlie Yoakum's group, said, called me up out of the blue and said, "Hey, I got a job." I said, "What are you talking about?" He said, "I have a job. Come." So I said, "Okay." And I interviewed. And I got it. It was that fast. And we now live 1.5 hours from my parents, 2 hours from my in-laws. Most of our cousins are within the area. It's been an absolute blessing for us. And since that point, we've added Tessa. So we have Evan and Tessa. I teach a lot. I have 37 credit hours of teaching this year. I'm paid for 24. I'll let you do the math on that. I do get some compensation for the overload. The buyout or payoff is there's no expectation for grant writing. If I do write a grant, I get paid extra for that. I don't write very many because I've got 37 contact hours. and I have 2 small children who like to see me. I do lots of research on different things. I have 6 students right now in the lab. They are fantastic. They keep me on my toes, and they help make sure that things continue to progress when I get confused, which is frequent these days. The best part for me is, like Peggy indicated, microbiology ain't dead. I was told 20 years ago, don't go that route, son. The field's dead. I've since talked to that faculty member and said, why did you tell us that? It's not even close. So I have a number of plant projects. I have some micro projects. I have some biochem projects. I have collaborations at Michigan, Michigan State, Ohio University, Purdue. I have the best of all worlds. I get to actively teach, like Siobhan says, that to me is my passion. That's what I truly love doing. But I still get to keep my hands in the field. I finally understand the RNA-seq thing. I'm not competent at it, but I at least understand it. I feel pretty good about that. And my students are at least kind enough to go, oh, good, he's figured it out. I said, yes, thank you. So for me, ASPB has been exceptionally important. The people at ASPB have always been very kind to me, very generous with their time. They've always been generous with helping my students out. It's a good family environment. So for all of you who are in this Conviron project / program, well done, welcome, and let us know how we can help you, because that's why we're all here. It's because someone helped us.
Excellent, that's great. We have the floor open for students, and students can either unmute or type into the chat box if they prefer. I'll start with a question though. So Aaron, you talked about teaching, you did, Siobhan. Carl, do you do any teaching in your position?
So at this position, it is 100% funded by the Agricultural Research Service. And so there are actually no, I'm not supposed to teach, but I do. I do, and I do it above and beyond what my current responsibilities are, because I think in order to stay relevant in a university environment, whether or not you actually have a university position, you have to get contact hours with the students. And so even though I'm ARS, I do run a university laboratory. Of the roughly 10 people, maybe 8 people in my group, I'm the only one who's not funded by the university, or I'm working for the university. And because I'm so ingrained in the university environment, I teach 1/3 of a photosynthesis course. I teach environmental plant physiology, and I teach plant physiology. Because it's an ARS research position, like I said, I'm technically not supposed to. But as long as I'm carrying these responsibilities above and beyond what my primary research foci are, then no one seems to have any problem with it.
And Peggy, I know you do a lot of outreach. Do you do some formal teaching as well?
I have had a class in the past, but the department decided I'm not really supposed to teach like Carl. Most of my teaching is outside, but I do guest lecturing, and I did have a class on, because there actually isn't a true agriculture class here at Berkeley, and I felt like that was something I could do. So I did that for about 6 years, and then they decided that it was taking me away from my job to go out to the community and talk. So I don't have a class anymore.
Okay. So the follow-up question, which for any of you really, is I know that you get a lot of training in research skills along the way, but suddenly you're in a position where you may or may not have, formal teaching duties. And did you get formal training in how to teach, or is it something that you basically get told, go teach now, and you have to figure it out? Yeah?
I've had one formal teaching class ever, and it was a day long. And that was arranged during my postdoc in Bern, and it was useful. Most of the learning I've done based on teaching for lecturing and things has been done through mentors. So when I was a graduate student, my advisor, John Harada, said, "You're going to teach some lectures." So he's an amazing lecturer, which you may or may not know. And he said, "You're going to teach some lectures." And so he had me in the class learning what he was doing, developing some of my own lectures. And so since then, I've basically learned by gathering to myself mentors. So I haven't always waited for them to approach me, which is another piece of good advice. If you see someone who you think is a really good teacher or a good speaker, talk to them, go to them, ask them for opportunities. Because again, there really isn't a lot of formal teaching instruction that happens when you're moving on in academia. I think it's maybe changing a little bit now. So at UCLA, we're starting to do what they call flipping the classroom. So you do a lot less lecture-based teaching and more interactive teaching. And so now we're starting to get classes on how to make your lectures more, well, less like lectures, more dynamic, more involved, and more interesting for students and getting them thinking. And so that's really useful.
And sort of follow up on that, I mean, I think throughout my entire career, there's always been resources available to become a better teacher, but none of those were necessarily required. And a lot of people sought those out. I did a couple of them early on. But when you end up in a position, you know, and so let's just pretend right now that I'm a university professor. When you find yourself in a position where teaching is a big part of what you do, early on it really is kind of a scramble, because you're taught many hours a week on how to be a researcher, on how to write, on how to publish papers, to some extent on how to write grants. You know, and then in a single-digit percentage of your time is actually spent as a requirement in learning how to become an effective teacher. So if you think, or if there's any chance that there may be some teaching in your future, take advantage of the courses and other training opportunities that are available on large campuses, even small campuses. Actually, they're probably much better at smaller campuses. Take advantage of those, because when you do end up in a career position, whether it's primarily research, primary teaching, anywhere in between, you know, you may find that you're woefully unprepared for all of the facets that go into this type of position. As I was, as I'm sure everybody on this panel was, you have to learn accounting, you have to learn budgeting, you have to learn teaching, you have to learn, you know, how to serve on committees, everything. And so the one thing you can get early on is teaching experience. It's a great way forward.
I think I'd like to comment about, I don't know how many of you had any training going out and talking to the public about what you do, but most people don't. And I remember when I first came here, the faculty were like, oh, you know, that's easy, you know, Lemaux, whatever. It is not easy. And people don't have training, and this is why I'm really pleased to be able to have time, well, not time, but I have money now, to help students, because now students really want to be out. The faculty here don't, but the students realize that's really a part of what they need to do now. You know, with the sort of anti-science, and I'm not going into politics, but students were really nervous with the sort of anti-science sentiment, and that was their #1 concern. And they said, you know, people think scientists are weird, and we want to get out there and show people that we're just normal people. But to do that, you need to learn some things, and you need to learn how to reduce what you do to something that, you know, somebody at the farmer's market can understand. So that, to me, that is also teaching, and it's something I had no training in whatsoever. But, you know, growing up in a family that, you know, didn't go to college and whatever, I had to go home and tell them what I was doing in my PhD, and that wasn't easy. And by doing that, you know, I think I learned sort of the sensitivities of what you have to do to talk to the public.
And you mentioned that you teach graduate students, right? Do you have any like materials that you could share with this group that give tips or advice? I have a lot of things that I use. I put up on our website. And you know, those are available for anybody to use. And there, I put all my talks up on the website, and I do, you know, 20 or 25 talks a year to just, in fact, tomorrow I go and I'm going to talk to a group of 150 wheat millers. So it's like, okay, then you know, the next day I might go to a high school, or I might go to a dietitian's conference, and I have to be sensitive to what those people know and what they might want to learn from me. That's great. We'll definitely share the links to your webpage and see how you talk to wheat millers. Erin,
Okay.
did you want to say something about how you learned how to teach 37 contact hours a week?
It's called 5-hour energy. I'm not sure.
Yeah, there you go.
I actually had a different background. My undergraduate mentor grabbed me when I was 19 and said, "This is what you're going to do because it's clearly your gift. It's what you want." And so I had a lot of experience even as an undergraduate as a TA. And then when I got to Carolina, they had this is 97, they had a very aggressive program already in place where you took multiple classes at the graduate level on how to be an effective teacher, and you went through everything. I had three sets of classes on it, of everything from the nuts and bolts of what a CV looks like, what a syllabus looks like, all the way to actually formalizing lesson plans and then executing them in a classroom. And that was a precursor to what a number of places have now, where you can do these semester-long seminars one after another on how to be a more effective teacher. And that really helped because I had the nuts and bolts in place so that when I was teaching as a graduate student, I wasn't just reciting questions. I was actively involved in the process. And the faculty I taught for were more than willing to negotiate with me lecture opportunities. So in fact, several said, "Yeah, here, how many do you want?" I thought it was candy. I didn't realize I was doing their job for them half the time. Which was a good deal for both of us. And then when I was a postdoc, I negotiated release time to go teach, and I would just go teach classes. So all along the way, I got lots of chances to practice, so that when I was an assistant faculty member, when I first started and I had these huge teaching loads, I still had to generate the classes, but I had a better idea of what I was doing. Siobhan's right, though. Everything I do right is because someone else showed me how to do it. All the stuff I do wrong is me. And I own that, and I tell my own students that all the time. I said, if something's bad, that's on me, and if it's good, it's because so and so said you should try this. And there's a lot of truth to that. I openly steal things from other people because that's really cool. I like that. That's what I like about ASPB is I go to these sessions and I watch people lecture or talk or discuss topics, going, "Well, that's a much better way than I do it." And I just go talk to them and I say, "Why do you do it this way?" And sometimes there's a formal reason. Sometimes it's just because they do it that way. I love that fact, and so I love watching how everyone else makes their cookies, because I burn enough cookies and I don't like burning cookies. So for me, I open and I give credit. I say, I saw this from so-and-so and it's really clever, and I do it.
Okay, we have a question from Juniper, who wants to know if you were ever tempted to move out of academia and maybe go into industry or something, or are you bonded?
I'm always tempted. I think I think that's one of the key things is, I'm very happy with where I am, and it would take a lot for me to ever move from where I am right now. But everything you have to, every perception you have is a reflection of the present. And so you never know what opportunities are in front of you. You never know what your next step is going to be. And I think no matter where you are in your career, I think you should look for the positive things that keep you where you are, that make you happy where you are. But I think it's nothing wrong with always keeping an eye to the horizon and see, what opportunities might present themselves in the future. Is that an opportunity that I'm willing to consider? And what would it take for me to consider that opportunity? And so, that mindset really led me from, an undergraduate degree in psychology, Spanish, and music to a master's degree in animal biology to a PhD in plant biology, working for a state lab, working for the ARS as a postdoc, to working where I am right now. I've never been unhappy with where I was, but I've always been keeping an eye to the future, wondering what might be the next step. And so right now, industry doesn't look very appealing to me. It has in the past, and it might again in the future. And so I think the key is just never just settle into where you are. Always consider where you are, where you might want to go in the future, and always keep options open.
I have another question, which is, I am aware that there's a big difference in today's students as compared to the students when I was a student. And I think today's students are a lot more sophisticated and maybe aware of, you mentioned the different opportunities of going out and talking to people, the need to develop skills. How do you see, your role